Welcome to Mentoring Moments. Mentoring Moments is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. It is composed of clips taken from Jason's one-to-one and group mentorship sessions. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another amazing episode of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Steve Pemberton from Elevatum to the pod. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you so much, Jason, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I love having guest mentors on the podcast today. You agreed to be a guest mentor on the E-Commerce Edge, and what I love about getting guest mentors on is oftentimes they're talking about subjects and topics that I may not be an expert on. I've got 24 years of experience in the industry, but that doesn't really matter considering how fast the industry moves and that there's oftentimes deep specialization required for specific areas of our industry. When I first started out, everybody was a generalist. You had to know a little bit of absolutely everything. But as the industry has matured over time, people have specialized in very niche specific things. And so they've developed skill sets that aren't necessarily my core skill sets. And so it's great to have someone like you along for the ride today.
Thank you. I really do appreciate it. I think it's going to be a great conversation. Because even as you said, it's in the beginning, because we've been doing this for 7 years now. So in those 7 years, and I just remember our best year being 2021. We did $1 million really quickly, and things change so fast. That's if people are just getting started in their e-commerce journey, or if you're further along, you definitely understand this, that things change day to day. It's not month to month. It's not quarter to quarter. It is literally every single day things change.
No question about that. And what I'd really love for us to spend some time on today and really getting into the nitty gritty of is e-commerce scaling, right? Yeah. And so you and your wife in particular you've got this experience with scaling stores. You and your wife have built 2 separate 1 million plus a year stores, e-commerce stores. And really you now have turned that experience and that skill set into a consultancy that helps brands go from say 500K to 5 mil a year from a scaling perspective and helping them understand how to unpick their numbers, how to unpick where their strengths, their weaknesses, their advantages are, doing a bit of a SWOT analysis of their business and helping them really, oftentimes as entrepreneurs, you're inside the fishbowl, right? You're doing the day-to-day operational things that you need to do to keep the business going, but you're not necessarily in a position to think as strategically about your business as you would like to because you're...
Absolutely.
And what are some of the key lessons, I guess, you learned when you were first building your own e-commerce brands? What were some of the most painful lessons that you learned along the way that you can share with my audience?
So the first one, absolutely. That was a fantastic way to introduce this because when our first store ever, then it went to $1 million a year. That is a big number. And it was impressive when you're telling people we made $1 million. But there's a second half to that. And the second half is that our profit margins were razor thin. We were bringing home 10% of that. And so for most people listening, they would love to bring home $100,000, but we also had an investor that was a financial backer. And at that time, we were in our very early 20s. We didn't know what it meant to have a financial backer. They were taking 50%. We were giving up a majority of our profits to this person that was allowing us to have the funding. Just think about all of the moving pieces that goes into it. You have to have a supplier. You're fulfilling 13,000 orders in a year. You have 6 employees, all to make $50,000. I'm pretty sure for me that there was a better way to do that. And what's so fascinating about that time and place was, and especially now when we're working with businesses, is it's great if you're excellent in marketing and you're able to get a lot of traffic to your store and to get a lot of sales. But if your profit margin isn't wide enough for you to sustain, it's not going to make a huge difference because there's going to be one change in legislation. There's going to be your supplier ends up going out of stock. Something happens and you just go out of business. So for me and for our company is when we come in and we look at these businesses or even in our own businesses was how did we grow from 10% to 20%? If you double your profit margins, you're doubling your business in the sense of what you actually can keep. So that was one of the big things was that. And the second one, which I think for most newer entrepreneurs was taxes. You got to pay those things. So when you do $1 million in a year, we think, oh, this is amazing, especially the second time around. Wow, this is great. We're living the life we've always wanted to. And then our accountant said, okay, hey, the IRS said you owe them tens of thousands of dollars. Now when we owe them money. And that was one of those moments where, wait, I actually had to pay money for the money that I made. Uh-huh. And that's one of those things when you're not prepared for that and you just think that you're making all of this cash flow, that it can bite you in the butt really quick.
And how did you even get into this e-commerce game in the first place? You're also a podcast host, Voices Like a Lion
Yeah.
podcast. But how did you first get sucked in, drawn in, lured in, whatever term you want to use, into this e-commerce game? What was the catalyst for you and your wife even to want to do e-commerce in the first place? Was it, hey, I don't want to work for the man, I'm unemployable because I'm too independent? What was it that caused you to say, hey, look, I think we can do this e-commerce thing and I think we can do it really well, and maybe we're just naive enough to be able to make a crack at this?
Yeah, so to be able to answer that question, I will take everyone back in time. And when we first got into business, we were 19 years old and we were doing an MLM. And I just remember we had just gotten married. Our son was on the way, and my wife said she didn't want to go back to work. So I said, hey, that's great, but I'm making $13 an hour, so we got to figure something out. So she decided to go into this MLM, and I watched her make $500 a month. And to me, I was sitting there working in a warehouse, breaking my body for 50 plus hours a week at that time. And I went, you can make money online? That's insane. So, of course, I did the only logical thing at that age and with a family, and I quit my job. And we went fully into business together, but there was no skills, there was no finances for us to be able to sustain. So we lost everything really fast, and I mean everything. And luckily for us, we had family that was willing to take us in. So we stayed in the basement, and that was a huge pivotal moment for me, because I just thought, I'm never getting back into business. This thing has burned me, so I'm just going to go work a job. And about 6 months later, ended up going into another job. And I was fully content with staying there forever. And in 2017, so we're going to fast forward now from about 2013, 2014 into 2017. In 2017, I had just gotten another promotion. Promotions were rolling in. I was one of the youngest managers in a Fortune 500 company in the entire thing. And I had my own warehouse. Everything was going good. I was making enough money for my wife to stay home full time, and we didn't have to worry about it. And for her, she's someone who is the hardest worker that I've ever met. I actually just told her that not too long ago, and that was the thing that I noticed for her is it just didn't sit well that all she did was clean the house and cook and take care of our son and do homeschool. That she said, there's only so much Netflix I can watch outside of doing these things. So she did the cardinal sin and posted how she felt on social media. And what ends up happening is my mom reaches out to her because my wife puts up a post just saying that she doesn't feel fulfilled. She feels like she's lost. And my mom reaches out to her and says, hey, I'm doing this Amazon thing. At that time, my mom had been doing private label. And so she reaches out to my wife. They get on a call. She shows her some stuff and she says, let me know if this is something you want to do with me. And I remember my wife talking to me when I came home from work that night, and she said, what do you think? And I said, absolutely not. There is no way.
Yeah.
I'm finally making enough money for us to live the life we want at this time.
Dream life.
It's like, there's no way. And I was up for the big $100,000 a year promotion and all this stuff. I was like, no. And so she had to let my mom know in 2 days. And of course, those 2 days later, she lets my mom know she's going to do it. So she goes against me. And what's really cool to watch, though, is because at that time I'm working 16 to 18 hours a day. And I watched her in the beginning. I was the worst. I was the worst husband. I was so unsupportive. And I watched her push through all these learning curves of getting into business, figuring out how you do this thing, and me. And what was cool was watching her go from someone who would cry when she would get a return or a 1-star review to within a year of that moment, that store went to $1 million. And what was amazing in that time frame too was when I realized what was happening. Because there was one day I came home, I worked 17 hours, she's still up. So I go to bed. I wake up, she's up before me. And I realized, okay, she's outworking me. So at that time we weren't bringing home a lot. So it wasn't about the money. It was about the work that was being put in. And in that moment, I realized that there was something different. And then in 2020 was when I decided that, hey, I was having anxiety attacks for the first time in my entire life. And I decided it's not worth it to me. We had this store, we're restructuring the store. So why not quit and just give it a shot? Push come to shove, I can always go get another job. At that time, I was 26. So at push come to shove, I could always go get another job. But I'd rather go down trying. So that's how I ended up in the e-commerce space. What's crazy is Amazon, that's what we were doing at that time. We thought that was going to be the vehicle, and it was not the vehicle for us. We ended up, and this is also one key point too when it comes to scaling, is we ended up using a supplier that we thought was good. They were all over social media. They had the nice house. They had the nice car. and they had started doing a wholesale. And what they did was you could buy their wholesale lots. So they had the supplier relationships with the actual brands. They were buying the pallets of that product and then reselling it to us. So we bought about $15,000 worth of product, and then we sent it straight into Amazon. And of course, because we're not brand certified, we get shut down. And we didn't know that would happen. And when we got shut down, it was a nightmare to try to get that account back. We had 2 months left, and we were just like, what are we going to do? We're $100,000 in debt because we had all this inventory on top of what we sent in. And for us, that's when we just made the huge shift into Shopify, with Facebook being one of our main sales channels. And that was when things really changed. When that started getting roots, and we went from making no money to $5,000 in the first month to $10,000 the next month to $15,000 to $30,000 to $100,000, some months $200,000. That's when I realized, hey, this e-commerce thing is real. And those skills that we learned in that business we've been able to apply that to so many other brands, and we've been able to see them have success because of the hardships that we walk through.
And so would you say that for you guys, that now when you're consulting to businesses that are looking to scale, that are looking to grow, maybe they're, I don't know, maybe they're side hustles, maybe they're small businesses. Yeah. What we saw during COVID was there was a million little mom and pop shops that set up shop. They were working from home. Maybe they were getting a little bit of a subsidy or a stimmy from the government, and they were like, I'm sitting around doing nothing. Why don't I do a side hustle? Why don't I start something online? Shopify makes it sound so easy. Metasend makes it sound so easy. Google makes it sound so easy. They make it basically the marketing, the build it and they will come mentality. And we all know that's not true. When you are either desperate or you've got too much money and time on your hands, oftentimes, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. We're susceptible. We're vulnerable to those types of marketing messages when we have some time on our hands or when we're desperate, one of the two. And in your case, you were desperate. In a lot of other cases, people have a lot of time. They got a bit of money on their hands and they go, hey, why wouldn't I want to retire on a beach in Bali after 6 months of starting my online business and work from anywhere from my laptop? That's the digital nomad dream, right? I'm literally living the digital nomad dream myself down here in Mexico. But the reality is I spent 24 years building up an experience level to allow me to do this. So I didn't do it 6 months after I got into the industry, right? It took me well over 20 years to amass the hard fought, just like you guys, lots of losing, lots of pain, lots of getting beat up by the industry, and then you eventually amass enough skills to where you can make a lifestyle out of this thing. And so I think that the trap here is that the whole entire e-commerce world seems to be telling us, just set up a Shopify store, load it up with some dropship products, and you're off to the races, right? Basically, drive a little bit of traffic to your website, spend a few $100s a day on some ads, and Bob's your uncle, right? You don't have to hold inventory. It's an asset-light model. It's kind of like the Uber model. It's an asset-light model. It's only going to cost you $50 a month for your Shopify subscription, and easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? But that's not really the case, is it?
No, that is absolutely not the case. And that's why I'm just laughing so hard listening to you explain that. Because when we were doing $1 million in 2021, we were doing, our whole model was through dropshipping. So, of course, our family is sitting there, and this is also very interesting because my family, actually, it was really my wife's family. She would come to us and say, hey, how are you guys doing that? It's like, that's so incredible. Will you just sit down and show us? And we did. We sit down and walked them through step by step. And they're still in the same spot 4 years later. And because they didn't implement it. And also, it's really not that easy. The one thing that I would say to anyone who is listening to this show and you're just getting started or you're thinking about getting started is most of the time for people getting into business, you overestimate what you can do in a year and you underestimate what you can do in 10. And that was one of my biggest things is we overestimated what we could do. We actually hit what we thought, okay, we could do this in a year. Then what happened is because we got the hit of $1 million in that year, when things got tough, when things changed, we didn't know how to handle it. To be completely transparent, we didn't know how to handle that because we thought in that time we had to restructure, we had to shift, we had to do all these major pivots, and that's tough in a business. But the whole thing of the dropship lifestyle, which a lot of people that I see online, especially social media, that are pushing it, the thing is, do they have the nice house? Do they have the car? Are they traveling the world? Probably, but they're probably doing that off of the back of your course that they're selling, off of the back of the coaching that they're selling. It's not like they'll have, and this is something that we could have done. I could go around and say, hey, I made $1 million twice. So buy my course. It is $497. But that's not the best way for me to serve people. And for me, a lot of these, there's a brand that I'm working with right now, that was something they were brand new when they brought me on. And what's fascinating with them is they just thought that through me giving these strategic advice and me telling them exactly what they need to do to grow their company, that it was going to become successful overnight, but they didn't put the work into it. And so when you look at those different aspects, is dropshipping dead? I don't think so. I think that you have to have a real business to sell that dropship products. You can't just make a Shopify templated store that looks absolutely terrible, and then you run $50 worth of meta ads to it, and you're going to be a millionaire overnight. You have all of those things take skills. It takes skills to build a highly converting website. It takes skills to actually find good dropship products and to know how to list those things in a way that sets you apart from everyone else. It takes skills to actually run ads that convert. So each one of these things is skills that most people don't have when they come into e-commerce. They just see it as the silver bullet, as, oh, I can do this, and in 6 months, I'm on a beach in Bali.
And I see this every single day on Reddit, on LinkedIn, on other social media platforms, especially Reddit, where, 4 or 5 times a day, I've basically got a few templated responses to these same types of questions. Is, hey, look, I've stood up a Shopify store, I've sourced some products, I've listed them on my website, I've spent $1,500, $5,000, $10,000, whatever it is on ads, and I'm not converting. I'm not getting any conversions at all. And you go to their website and you go, this looks like a crappy mercantile store. You're clearly a drop shipper. It's got no contact information on the website. It's got no founder story. It's either got no images or crappy images. It's got no product descriptions or crappy product descriptions. It's got no trust whatsoever. The product descriptions oftentimes will have poor English, or you can tell this has been written by AI. You've got no email address. You're lucky if you've got a contact form. You've definitely got no phone number. You've definitely not got no physical address. And you think, would you buy from you? That's the question I ask, is would you buy from you? And if I can find this exact same product on Amazon for cheaper, Amazon already has the trust. Amazon's likely got the best price, especially here in Mexico, for example. I can 99% of the time be sure that they will get my products to my door within 1 to 3 days maximum here in Mexico, which you can't say that about everybody here in Mexico. Shipping is really difficult. The addressing here is really difficult. There's a lot of rural addresses. And as a result of that, if you can find your same product somewhere else that has more trust, because it really mostly comes down to trust. Mostly. It doesn't just come down to price. It also comes down to trust. And at the end of the day, I do most of my shopping online. Now, I know I'm abnormal, but 90% of my shopping is done online. I don't really enjoy physical shopping like some people do. I much prefer to shop online.
Same.
But even me, and even with the confidence and trust that I have in e-commerce, generally speaking, when I land on a website that looks dodgy, I don't give them my money. It's that simple. Yes. And I'm probably one of the most trusting online buyers that there is. And when you think that there's a lot of websites I wouldn't buy off of, then you think of the average person who goes, I'm not quite sure whether I trust this online thing outside of Amazon, maybe outside of eBay, outside the major platforms, or outside of the major websites that we've all heard of and the major brands we've all heard of. It takes a lot to get someone to, first of all, not just get to your website, but to find something that they like and present them with the products that are actually attractive and interesting to them, but then get them over the line of conversion and trust. It feels like that's a big hill to climb, and for some reason, I don't know why this is, and I'd love your take on this. It feels like people, especially on Reddit, I don't know why specifically on Reddit, maybe it's because most people are anonymous on there, I don't know. But it feels like lots of people that come into e-commerce for the very first time, they don't approach it like you would a normal career. Now, when I say a normal career, what I mean by that is you expect, if I'm going to go be a doctor, or if I'm going to go be a lawyer, or even if I'm going to do a blue-collar job, I'm going to be a builder, I'm going to be a plumber, I'm going to be an electrician. Even if I'm going to do a trade, I have the expectation that I'm either going to have to go to school, a trade school, I'm going to have to do an apprenticeship, I'm going to have to learn some basic skills before I can go out there and I can do my job and get paid well for it. Why is it that people that jump into e-commerce don't treat it like a career and don't treat it like there's a massive amount of learning they're going to need to be able to do to be successful? Because it seems like e-commerce is the only industry that people think like that.
So my take on that is, this is why I love your podcast. That's why I want more people to find this podcast, because the way that you're breaking down that it's about trust, the way that you're saying there's no founder story, there's nothing to anchor that this is different. Even what I said earlier, you can have a drop shipping store, but how do you set yourself apart? You can have the same product that you can find on Amazon, but if you have ordered that and you can actually take professional pictures and you've set it apart, that way it looks different, now all of a sudden you're building credibility. And I think the biggest aspect of what you just asked is I just believe it's the way that it's presented to people. If you are presented a franchise, like a McDonald's franchise, you know that's going to take work. I'm going to have to find a building. I'm going to have to find real estate. I'm going to have to hire people. I'm going to have to figure out how to make these burgers, or Chick-fil-A, let's say. But when all you're presented is people on a yacht and people sitting in front of the Lamborghini, people working on the beach, when that's all you're presented, then that's what you think it's going to take. It's going to take me being on vacation and working 4 hours a week, and this thing is going to explode. But that's not the truth. If you approach it just like any one of these other businesses now, if you especially approach it like a doctor and you take time before you jump full headlong into it, if you're listening to this and you're still working in corporate and this is your side hustle right now, but you want to scale it and exit your corporate job, learn. You need to go and learn. You make sure that you have an understanding and then start applying it. You go and you listen to this podcast and you get one thing out of it and then you go test it out. And you learn how to do it a little bit better. You go read a newsletter, you go read some books, you go to a mastermind, you go do whatever it takes to learn the skills. Because once you get the skills, it doesn't matter if that store succeeds or it doesn't. If you have to restructure, you got to pivot, you got to make something new, you have the skills. And the skills go with you everywhere. But people, even as I said earlier, they overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate 10 years. And what does that really mean? Is that means they overestimate what they have to know. They think, even as you said earlier, that they go template a Shopify store and they go hook it up to a drop shipping supplier and like Alibaba, and there you go. Magically, everyone finds it. They've got 2,000 people visiting their store every day, and they're a millionaire. But that's not the truth. Go and learn. And I believe that there's great softwares out there. There's great people that coach this kind of stuff. There's great people that sell these kind of courses, but you have to find them, and you actually have to vet them. There's one guy I know for sure. He's living the dream lifestyle, and all of his reviews is, hey, I made my first $1,000 this month. But you spent more than $1,000 to get into the course. You made your first $1,000. That is, where's the review from this guy making $1,000 a day? Where's the review from this guy making $1,000 every half a day, where he's actually making $60,000 a month? Where are those reviews? If you're not seeing those reviews, you only see the beginning where they made their first $1,000. That course probably isn't helping them actually have a different life. Now, it's cool you made $1,000 online and you can say you did that, but if you invested $1,000, you just broke even. And realistically, if you made $1,000 revenue, you actually didn't make your $1,000 back.
Yeah.
And that's also a big thing too, is like revenue and profit, two wildly different things.
And where would you suggest, based on your experience, where would you suggest that someone start? They're working a 9 to 5. They're feeling like they're beat up by their job. They've got an hour commute each way. They don't have a lot of time for their family. They're really just treading water. They're not making enough money to make investments into the stock market, so they're never going to be an owner of anything of significance. Maybe they're renting. They don't even own their own home, or maybe they're buried in their mortgage and they can barely make ends meet, and so they're putting every spare cent into their mortgage just to keep their head above water. But they see this as a life raft, right? They see e-commerce and they say, look, this has clearly worked for a lot of people. It's almost like real estate, right? Real estate's worked for a lot of people. Maybe it doesn't work for everyone, but it's worked for lots of people, right? Yeah. There's a lot of shysters out there selling real estate courses and the rest, but clearly real estate, because if you look at most of the wealthiest people in the world, a significant portion of their portfolio is real estate. So clearly real estate works for a significant portion of the population. Right. We can almost say the same thing about e-commerce. Not everybody's going to succeed. Lots of people are going to fail, but it does work for a significant portion of the population if they put the effort, the time, the dedication, and if they treat it. And this is the comment that I often respond to these Reddit threads on, as I say, look, did you assume that literally within 2 weeks of setting up your Shopify store that this was going to be literally an overnight success? When you have no experience, you've got no background, you've got no training, you haven't ever gone and worked for an e-commerce brand to learn the ropes and see behind the curtain. I tell them, I say, if you've got no experience in this game, you can either learn it by spending the money and paying the price to learn, and just look at it like a university education. If you spend $50,000 in your first year to learn the foundational basics that you need to learn, there you go. You've basically paid your dues. If you don't want to do that and you want to get paid to learn, then you need to effectively do an apprenticeship. You need to go and you need to work for a successful e-commerce brand. You want to get to as close to the sun as you possibly can, and or go and work for an agency. Go and work for somebody who's actually helping these businesses succeed, where you've got hard evidence that they're successful. Learn the ropes. Be an apprentice, learn, be humble. You might have to take a massive pay cut from where you're at today in that first 1, 2, 3 years. But it's if you had to quit work to go back to university for a 4-year degree, you're probably at best going to be able to work part-time while you're studying full-time. And it's just so odd. People are prepared to go into hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt for student loans, but yet they think that they should immediately be successful online. I have a hard time connecting those dots when people are having those conversations online.
Hey team, I have a big favor to ask you. Please pause this episode and send the link of this episode to someone you know that you think would enjoy this content. Really appreciate you spreading the word. This is how we grow. We're not a Joe Rogan. We don't have big, massive advertising budgets, but we absolutely want to grow. We want to get the learnings from all of these episodes out to as wide of an audience as possible, and we need your help to do it. Thank you, and now back to your listening.
Yeah, and I do too, because for me, the other part to what you were just saying is just staying in that industry. Because typically what I've seen is when people have spent 2 weeks and they haven't gotten their sales yet, then they're just ready to jump off the boat and go do something else. It's the same thing with real estate. If you don't close your first deal in the first 30 days, it's, this doesn't work for me, I'm gonna go do something else. But you didn't give it enough time. And you probably, if you are at the negotiating table, if you made it that far, then there's some things that you probably did right to get to the negotiating table, but you got to actually go identify. This is why in business, especially e-commerce, should be very data driven. It should not be crazy emotional. It should not just be like, I feel like changing this today. But why would you change that? It's like, why would we completely overhaul the homepage because you aren't getting sales? How many people did we get to the store today? 2. So is it the store? Is it the homepage that's not working, or is your marketing not working? And maybe we should just start with the marketing. We get enough water into the bucket, we can actually see where the holes are. But a lot of times people want to make rash decisions and they want to completely overhaul some aspect of their business without actually getting the data behind it. And that's very dangerous. I know that emotions are great and you can be emotionally tied to whatever the marketing is, whatever the homepage is. But you also, if you can hold it with an open hand and say, hey, maybe I don't know everything about this business. Maybe I don't know everything about marketing. Maybe I don't know everything about CRO or conversion rate optimization. Maybe I don't know everything about SEO. And you can hold it with an open hand. That's where you can have great conversations and identify areas of weakness. Because if you are an excellent marketer, but you are terrible at websites, hire somebody to build a website. You stick in your lane. Because you hire people for their strengths and that covers your weakness. Don't go learn your weakness. Now, if you're somebody that you don't have the money, for me, if you have an hour commute, like your example, listen to podcasts like this and just start understanding the skills. And that, like actually taking time in the car, that is free time for you to be able to learn. And podcasts is a great way to do that. Getting hyper focused on what are you learning out of that show. And then when you get to work, it's just jot down some notes real quick before you clock in. If you can do that and go back home and say, oh, I've already got my Shopify. They said that I should work on my credibility today. Then figure out when you go and look at it, I like to say, look at it from the common sense corner. Go stand in the common sense corner, look at your website. Is this somewhere you would buy from? Don't fall in love with it because you built it. But is this something that you would buy from? If there's one image on there, who knows where, and there's nothing else. There's no credibility pieces. There's no reviews. You've got one picture. There's a contact us that is broken. You're probably not buying from that website. So if that's the response that you get when you look at your own website, then you know how to start working on it. If this is me and I'm standing in my common sense corner, I'm going to work on this one part. I want them to know why I even started this business. I got into this because in 2020, I quit my job, was full-time at home with my wife, and we discovered home goods was the best thing that we could sell and the best thing that we knew. And so we decided to create our own storefront, and this is what it is. And we hope you enjoy the journey. Like just doing something that has story, because now, and especially have your face. If you can have your face or as your founder story, now it solidifies that you're a brand and you're a real person. You're not just a faceless brand that everyone wants to be for some reason. And this isn't YouTube. You don't have to be a faceless brand. But if you, especially in the beginning, attach your face to it. Obviously now we don't have Sam Walton as the face of Walmart, but it had to grow to that point. In the beginning, Sam was known for Walmart. And then over time, he was able to remove himself, which is what you have to do to make that thing better to exit, which is a whole nother conversation. But in the beginning, making sure that you add those credibility pieces.
No question about it. And for that next step, someone's maybe they've listened to a few podcasts. They're really excited. They're really pumped, right? They're going, man, I can see a way out of this. I can see a way out of where I am today, and I can see a path, a glimmer of hope. I can see a crack in the doorway with some light coming through it that makes me feel really excited, really pumped. How would you say that someone from a next step perspective, would you typically recommend that someone try to go work in the space first?
Yes.
Or would you say, look, let's just go and set up the $39 a month Shopify store. Let's try to find some products that we can source. Let's get a drop shipping app that plugs in, that makes it easy for me to pull down products and inventory. And then on the completion of those orders, assuming I get some, they get automatically pushed back out to the vendors for direct fulfillment. The challenge I see with that model is that drop shipping by its very nature creates a poor customer experience by definition.
Yes.
Because 99% of the time, those products are coming from China, they're coming from Vietnam, they're coming from Korea, they're coming from someplace very far away. And so typically, the shipping times are a minimum of a week. Like we're talking like an absolute minimum of a week. In today's day and age of instant gratification, one of the reasons why Amazon wins is if I order today by 4 p.m., it's highly likely I'm going to get it tomorrow. And therefore, if I've got a time crunch, I've got an event I got to go to and I need a product, or I got something at home that I got a problem at home that I need to fix and I can get this Amazon thing really quick, in many cases, it's actually faster for me to get a product from Amazon than it is to literally go down to the store and get it, and they may or may not have it in stock, and it's across town, and it's in traffic, and it's stressful, and I'm certainly not going to get a great price on it. If I go to a physical retail store, it's very rare that I'm going to get the best price. And so I wonder what the best path for someone who's really excited. And look, I tread this line, right? Yeah. I want to encourage people to be super excited about the opportunity that e-commerce presents. And I don't want to be a negative Nancy. I don't want to put a wet blanket on anybody's passion. It can be a truly life-changing opportunity for the better. But I also want to set realistic expectations and realistic next steps to take, right? And it's a really difficult thing for me to tread that line.
So this is the same advice that I give everyone who asks me about going into business and they're still working a job, is two things. Is one, keep working the job, listen to podcasts, read books, learn the skills. Or two, if you want to go faster and get paid to do it, go work. That's the best way to do it, bar none. I mean, I'm one of those people who I'm the exception to that rule. I jumped completely off the ledge and jumped in full faith. And I got lucky, if I'm honest. Like, I think that you hear that a lot of times from people who are really successful. The timing was perfect for me. Timing played a huge role in my success. And so for me, if I went back and I had to do it again, I'm not quitting the job. Like, I'm going to stay in the job and I'm going to learn the skills, and then I'm going to take my extra money. And the thing for me is I have my wife at home. So everything I'm learning, I'm able to translate for her to implement. So if that's not your situation where you're having to learn and implement, by far the best way to do it is to go work for an agency. Go work, especially if it's I think if you can work for a full service agency. Actually, our business partner, my wife and I, our business partner, he sold a multi-7-figure full service agency. So he knows every aspect of e-commerce businesses. He's been doing it for 16 years. But when you go and you work in that space, if you come in and you're helping out with customer service, get really good at customer service. I trust me, in the beginning, you're not going to have a ton of that, but as you start scaling, you're going to have a ton of that. People asking you questions, or people that need a return, people that are just trying to figure out if you're real. There's going to be a lot of customer service. So just get good there. And then once you get good there and you move into the next department, you move into marketing. Great. Learn marketing really well, because you're getting to see what the mindset is behind it. The biggest thing is when you're learning skills, it's not just how to do things, it's why you do them. If you can understand why you put the creative this way, why it's a video and not a picture, why you have a catchy tag right at the top of your ad, why the call to action is the same on every single ad if you're trying to split test, why is it this way? If you can understand why you do things a certain way, that's going to carry you very far. But especially if you can get into a bigger agency, full service, and then just go department by department. And if you can do it fast, where you're just always learning, you're implementing there, then when you start your own store, you're going to go so fast, because you will not only have the knowledge, you'll have the wisdom. You've been doing it for the past 6 months, the past year. and you've been getting paid. And the cool thing is you can take what you're learning and then go get your $39 a month Shopify store and start implementing those things now. And then when you leave and you decide to go fully into it, you have something that's running, already producing some kind of revenue, hopefully producing decent profits when you leave. Now you can, when you have time freedom, you can go all in. And then you can go very fast, but you have the skills to do it.
And I think people are afraid that it shows weakness, or they have to take a cut in pay initially because it's a new industry for them or whatever. And so it's hard because you have to eat some humble pie whenever you're going into something brand new to you. You have to eat a lot of humble pie, but it would be the same no matter what industry you're going into. If I went and I decided to be a builder tomorrow and I went and took up an apprenticeship as a builder, I would eat a lot of freaking humble pie before I got to the point where I was a qualified builder. And I would just go into it knowing that. I would go into it expecting to eat a lot of humble pie and be on a job site with people that have 10, 15, 20 years of experience and are going to look at me like I'm the newbie idiot. And I'm just going to accept that's paying your dues, right? And people need to be prepared to pay your dues to get you got to do what people aren't prepared to do so you can get what people want to have and ultimately what you want to have, right? You got to make some sacrifices. And I think you hit the nail on the head with agency work. My very first role in e-commerce, my very first job in e-commerce was working for an agency. Then I started my own e-commerce business. Then I sold that. Then I went back into agency work. Then I went back working with brands. Then I went back into agency. Then I started my own consultancy. I think that people maybe sometimes get a little bit caught up in well, I've got to make this e-commerce website a success or I am a failure as a person.
Yes, absolutely.
Their business success is their personal self-worth is tied to the success or failure of their business. I tell you, I have failed more than I've succeeded. Luckily, the successes have been bigger monetarily than my failures. But in terms of sheer volume of failures, I've failed lots and lots of times. You got to get really comfortable with that, right? You got to be willing to do whatever it takes to keep moving forward, right? So I think that you'll probably get burned out if you do pure agency work for 5+ years. Most people, in my experience, from what I've witnessed, people can do, because of the hours required, because of the high stress environment you're basically doing client services, which is super demanding, super stressful. You're trying to justify your existence every single day with your clients. I find that most people can do 5 to 6 years of agency work until they're burnt out. And then at that point, they can choose to either go be a consultant, they can go and choose to work in-house at a brand, which is probably the easiest way to do. After you've worked inside an agency, to go work inside a brand, man, that's like a cakewalk. I can go deep instead of wide, right? Instead of working with 15 clients or 20 clients, now I can work with effectively one client internally, and I'm inside the kimono, so I have all the internal knowledge, I have all the internal analytics, I have all the internal financials to know what to do to help move the lever in these businesses. And so I feel like people sometimes, because their self-worth is so tied up in whatever they're doing in the moment, that if that one thing fails, they feel like they're a failure.
It's over. Yeah.
And that's a really scary place that people get.
Absolutely. I was there. When the original business, when I was 19, failed, I thought I was a failure. And to the point where I was contemplating taking my own life. And when I'm sitting in that place feeling like a terrible father, I've got a 6-month-old son, I'm living in this basement, I feel like I failed my wife. I mean, everything. And here's the really fascinating part. I was 20 and I thought my life was over. But I promise you, I can make one guarantee. I don't make a lot of them, but I can make one guarantee that you do not lose unless you quit. If you quit and you give up, that is when you lose. Failure is just a thing. Failure is when you're a baby, that's encouraged. It's encouraged for you to get up and try to walk and then fall over. Yay, you took your first steps. That's exciting as a parent. But why is it that as we get older, failing becomes this monster where it's you had one shot and you failed? This isn't a bomb scenario where you've got 30 seconds, you got to clip the red wire, not the black one. If it's that, then yes, absolutely, you got to get it right the first time. But if that's not your scenario, then I promise you, it feels like you're dying in those moments if you have your self-worth tied to it. But if you can realize that it's like, hey, that's just part of my story, that's not the whole story. That's where you get freedom to keep walking through these things. Like for you, if you had your first failure and you said, this is it, I suck, I'm going to go be a builder now. It's like, you wouldn't be sitting on this podcast. You wouldn't have had the successes if it's not for the failures are just meant to teach. You're just learning. It's the same thing as walking. You had to learn. You didn't get it right the first time. It's the same thing if you played sports. If you played basketball, you didn't make your first shot. Even if you did, you had to keep improving if it's something you want to stay in. But that's why I was saying it earlier in this podcast, is just be willing to stay in it. I promise you that the best opportunity you can get into is the one that you're in right now. If you're doing e-commerce, stay. E-commerce is a $1 trillion industry. Last time I checked, it was $3-4 trillion industry. So I promise you, your 1,000 sales a month is not capping out the industry. There's a lot of wiggle room. And even if you get a very small sliver of that, you are living very well. But you have to stay. If you decide to flip and say, I'm going to go be a real estate agent now, then you're going to have to learn it all over again. And then if you decide to go from real estate to being a painter, you're going to have to learn it all over again. And unless you're moving from one industry where those skills are applicable, like for me, I was in logistics and supply chain. So when I moved over into e-commerce, those skills served me very well. I knew how to vet suppliers. I knew how to do forecasting. I knew how to vet quality. All these things I knew how to do. So it was easier for me to come over. Now, if I'd have gone from being a car salesman to e-commerce, wildly different skills. But my encouragement is just stay there, continue to learn. And I promise you that if you don't quit, you don't lose. Just keep moving forward.
I could say the same thing for my podcast, because I tell you, growing a podcast audience is probably one of the most difficult, unless for some reason you have a guest that goes viral or something like that, and you use a cheat code of some variety, and you have a certain amount of at-bats. And if you have one of those home runs, then awesome, great, fantastic. But the reality is, building a podcast audience is really difficult. It's very time consuming, and it takes a massive commitment, right? But I knew that going in, and I knew pod fade was a thing, and I knew that most podcasts never get past episode 20. So at episode 386, I'm already winning, right? Regardless of the size of my audience, regardless of whether I can quit doing everything else and be a creator full time, I've already won, because I've already outlasted like 99.9% of podcasters that start a podcast. The vast majority of them never get past episode 20. Then an even smaller percentage get past 50. And an even smaller percentage get past episode 100. Very few get past episode 300. So the reality is that for me, that's a win, right? That I proved to myself I can stick with something even though it is difficult. But it has so much value for me outside of, oh, cool, can I make this a living? That's beside the point. If that happens, great. I will embrace that wholeheartedly. Fantastic. But it has so many other benefits for me as a human being, and it's taught me so many very important skills, and it opens up opportunities to have conversations with experts like yourself that I couldn't have those conversations any other way. So the reality is that there's massive benefits to me as a human being, independent of the money it might make me.
Yeah, and that is so spot on. And because your podcast is top 0.001% at this point because of how long you've kept doing it. And you just didn't quit. And here's the thing too, is that's why especially in business, even with YouTube, your metric of success is not quitting. That's your metric of success. Your metric of success is not, I'm making $3,000 a month off of my ad revenue. If that was your metric of success, if you're hitting that, great. If you're not hitting that, then you just feel, oh man, I've been pushing at this thing for the last 4 years and it just hadn't got there. But I think it's about redefining your metrics of success. Yes, you can have your goals of, okay, we're doing $2,000 a month. We want to get to $10,000 a month. Great. And then figure out what are the steps to actually get there. Make a actual plan. Cool. But also just making the metric of success, doing the work. If your metric of success is continuing to learn, improve, continuing to pour into your team, if you have employees, continuing to love them, continuing to help them improve their skills, continuing to duplicate yourself. This is a great conversation I had with a team that I volunteer on, is there's certain people who they want to be irreplaceable. And I said the best way to identify a good leader of a team is when they are completely replaceable. Because that means everyone else on the team has the same exact skills, has the same exact mindset, where if that leader can't be there, if they leave, if they're, God forbid, they die, then the team keeps moving at the same pace. They keep growing, the team keeps growing, the business keeps growing. But those are the mindsets you got to start adopting early on in your e-commerce career, and especially as you start having success, is not, how can I be the end all be all? It's actually, how can I duplicate myself so that way I don't have to be in it every single day? I can actually have a team, and I can, because you as a founder, your main job is to focus on growing. Your main job is not, how do I make better creatives? Let me go make sure the quality is really good. You actually should have a team that you can trust, that they know you so well that they know, hey, Steven actually thinks that this is terrible. Hey, our customer service was really bad. It took us 3 days to get back to that person who they had a massive issue. We're going to handle this before Steven ever has to get involved. But when you start taking those actions in your business, now you're growing something that has legs. The one thing that I've seen time and time again in e-commerce as well that always hurts my heart when I see it is rapid growth into, it's almost like pod fade, where you just rapidly grow and then it dies. And typically it does that because in the beginning, you just put so much time in, so much effort in, so much money in, it starts growing, but you don't know how to sustain it. Or you get to a point where it's doing 10K a month, but it's not growing. Now, one of our clients that he just came on board, he's got a brand he's been working to build for 7 years. And it got to a point where it was just about to break over $50,000 a month. And then all of a sudden it got stuck. It got stuck at about $40,000. And when you get stuck, you're actually dying. Most people don't realize that. But for him, he got stuck at 40 and then it started declining. Then it was like 30 and then it declined a little bit more into the 20s. And so then that's when we got brought in because I don't know what to do. He said, I've tried. I keep doing the same stuff that was working and it's not working. But when you can identify those things, like for him, he's willing to hold his brand open-handed and say, hey, I'm not the expert in everything. You are more of an expert in this. Can you help me identify what I don't see?
Helping people see around corners is a gift, and I tell you, sometimes it's a gift and a curse, because sometimes you gotta.
Yes.
It's really difficult to tell people when their baby's ugly, right? The people don't want to hear their baby's ugly. That's the reality, and as people that work in this space and are consultants, that's large part of what we're required to do. People inside the business, they're too afraid to say the things that need to be said because they're too afraid of losing their job, right? Yeah. We as consultants are brought in specifically for that purpose. We are brought in to tell them what is not working and how to make those things better incrementally. And so I feel like we're almost given a free pass to come in and make those really hard calls and have really hard discussions, because that's what we're being paid to do. We're being paid to identify areas that need improvement, and then specifically, okay, here's some concrete steps you can take to make those improvements. And so I feel like we're in a very enviable position, because I find that usually when I'm going in consulting, oftentimes those ideas are already in the business. There's somebody in the business that already knows what needs to be fixed. It's just they've never been given the air cover by the leadership in the business to make those changes. And I come in and I validate thinking that's already in the business. And based on my experience and based on data, I can say, this is the direction we should be going. And this person's over there going, but I've been saying this exact same thing for years and nobody wants to listen to me. But if you can go in and you can effectively find allies in the business that are already thinking in the same direction that you're thinking, then not only can I make your job easier, and I'll be happily give you the kudos. If that idea came from you, I don't need the kudos. I'm being paid in here as a consultant. It doesn't really matter. It's a meritocracy, right? The best ideas should win. It does not matter where those ideas come from. And if I can come in and give people within the business the air cover to execute on good ideas, then my job's done.
100%. That's something that I've noticed a few different times. Is you basically come in as a fiduciary. You come in where you're getting paid to be honest. And that's the one thing that these agencies, especially there's a brand that they were doing about $5 million a year. And we came in to take a look at their stuff because he was spending $15,000 a month on agencies. He had no idea what they were doing, and he had been paying them for months. And I thought, you don't know anything that they're doing? So no, I just know they're supposed to be running my marketing and doing some SEO. That's $15K a month. I'm doing the wrong thing. It's like doing the wrong thing if one client's $15K a month and they don't know what you're doing. But I came in and I was just honest with him. It's, hey, so he had 2 different agencies. I said, your SEO agency is doing great. They just haven't had enough time with this new website that you created. You just got to give them some runway. I said, because I was able to look at the other stuff and then we were able to identify, hey, just make sure that they do these things. And they didn't. So that's something I can speak to him about because I've been keeping an eye on it. But they were supposed to cut off the other websites. So right now they didn't. So right now, all the SEO work that they're doing it's flowing to 2 different places. So when you do that, you lose all authority when it comes to Google because they don't know what this traffic is supposed to actually go to. So that's really bad. The other one, when it came to their ad agency, was doing absolutely nothing. And they were getting tons of money. And so I was just honest with them and saying, hey, they're not doing what they are saying that they are doing. And here's the proof, because I pulled up, you can easily Google this. You can easily Google Meta Ad Library and just look at the brand. It's not really difficult. I use it all the time, and they're blown away when I show them their ad and I say, hey, it's actually not working because you have a carousel of pictures and they're all terrible. And that's one ad. And the call to action isn't even there. There's no button for them to push. It's sending them to Messenger. That doesn't make a lot of sense. When I do those things because I'm coming in, I don't have any skin in the game of making sure that the ads work. I don't have any skin in the game for making sure that the SEO works. So I don't feel bad when it's one of those things. Also, you have the other side of the coin where the agency is doing what they said they're doing. They're doing it to the best of their ability. And then you have the founder who is basically hounding them because they want it to be better and better, or they don't understand why things aren't like this. And the agency's scared to say, hey, the reason why we can't is because you won't give us the creatives. We've been asking for more creatives for the last 3 months. You're not giving it to us, so we just have to keep running the old stuff. That's why these ads are dying over time, because the audience is getting too used to seeing it. But those things, when you're able to come in, hear that from the agency, tell the founder, hey, they are doing what they say they're doing, but this is what I'm hearing, that they've been asking you for creatives. Is that true? Oh yeah, so they really need those. So they really need those videos that you took 2 months ago and haven't got to them. They really need that stuff. But when you come in and you're in that position to just be honest, and the founder lets you be honest, now there's freedom to grow. That's a business that can grow. And also you're able to identify areas quickly that need to grow and how to do it, because now you've talked to all parties. It's not just you're working one-to-one with the founder. You need to be let in to the other areas of the business. If it's an in-house team, you need to actually touch base with the in-house team. You're not just consulting and saying, hey, you need to fix your website. Hey, the marketing is not good. Go talk to the in-house marketing team and figure out if they even have the skill sets to make that better. If they don't, then maybe you're going to have to, from your experience, train them a little bit, help them out a little bit. That way they can execute on the vision that the brand has, they can execute on the vision that you have as a consultant.
Or that agency needs to come in and give you some outside training. Maybe and that could be knowledge transfer. Most agencies I know of are quite happy to be paid a pretty penny to come in and do some internal training, some upskilling, some analytics upskilling, etc. Yeah. They're willing to do that. As long as you pay them for their time, they're usually more than happy to do that, because they don't necessarily want to do the simple stuff. They want to do the stuff that really moves the needle. So they don't necessarily just want to do BAU daily stuff that they think a brand should absolutely be trained and capable of doing themselves. And so agencies are, more often than not, they're very happy to come in, teach you how to do those BAU daily things that they don't want to be doing. And they, even if you were willing to pay them for that stuff, it's boring, repetitive work that is not fulfilling for them to do. So the reality is they want to be doing the game-changing stuff. And so if you can upskill your team to take on and own the BAU stuff that every day it just needs to be done, it's a cyclic thing, just needs to happen every single day, boom, then you can bring in some training, do some knowledge transfer, and you're off to the races. Listen, Stephen, an hour has almost flown by here, and I have really enjoyed the conversation. I tell you, it's really good to hear validation from someone else who's gone through a somewhat similar journey. Obviously, you're a lot younger than me, and you've got better hair than me. I won't hold that against you. It's great to hear this validation that in many cases, people that are new to our industry, sometimes the best way that they can get better is just go and work for someone that's doing it really super well. Learn from, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Go and learn from someone that has been successful, that you know has been successful, that you can validate that they're not just saying they're successful, that you can prove that they're successful, or they're at least a well-known household brand or something along those lines, that you can say, this is something that I can learn and I think I can emulate this. If I get behind the curtain and I do enough training and I do the grunt work long enough, I can learn enough lessons to where I can go and replicate this on a smaller scale in my own business. So I love to hear it. I love to hear it.
Yeah.
Now,
quick example.
Yeah, please
and
do.
then
Please
I'll
do.
let you close the show. But there's so Layla Hormozy. Most people know who Alex and Layla Hormozy are. But Layla Hormozy talked about this, where there was a brand that they were trying to figure out how to do their marketing better. So she came in and she said, okay, everyone in the company make 3 different ads. And the person that ended up doing the best was the social media manager. And her ads outperformed everyone by a mile. And because she had been working in it, she saw that what people engage with. And those were the ads that performed the best. Now, when she took those skills and then implemented it into her own business, and that business is now doing $30 million a year. So that's a lot of money. But she learned those skills inside of another brand. When you learn the skills and you know that you know what you know, when you apply it to your own business, you know it's going to work because you've already seen it time and time again.
And you've learned on somebody else's dime, which I think
and you got paid to learn. Yeah.
And you got paid to learn. Instead of paying to learn, you got paid to learn. I love that. I absolutely love it. Now, mate, as we come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you as my guest. I get to let you ask me one question, any question you like. It could be personal or professional. Steve Pemberton, what is your question for me?
My question for you is, over your 24 years, when you're looking at brands, you're working with brands, have you seen be the number one differentiator between brands that are successful and brands that have floundered?
95+% of the time, it comes down to the leadership of the business. It is, you can have people that are absolutely amazing at all tiers of the business, but if the leadership isn't fully bought in and committed to digital excellence, the business will not be digitally excellent. It does not matter. You will not, if the leadership of the business is a handbrake on your digital success, either because of not enough human resources, not enough capital resources, not enough external resources, and they just don't believe in those channels. And I run across this probably even more today now that I'm focusing on the B2B world than in the B2C and D2C world. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, the B2C and D2C world, there was a lot of skepticism whether this whole digital e-commerce thing is this a fad or is this a trend, right? I think we now know this is a trend and it's not going away anytime soon. It's up and to the right, and it would be rare. I would say it would be almost unforgivable if you were a new retail brand that started up and you didn't, even if you were a physical retail store, if you didn't have an e-commerce website, right? It's a given. It's table stakes nowadays. In the B2B world, it's not still. Field sales is still the most common way to make B2B sales for physical goods. Customer service will often take orders. They'll be keying them directly into ERP systems. And so there's still, I would say we're somewhere 10, maybe 12 years in the B2B world behind where B2C and D2C is at in terms of adoption and mindset at the leadership level. And I'm very honest, I'm very transparent about this. It's largely because in a lot of these legacy B2B brands working in legacy B2B verticals, leadership is male, pale, and stale. That's the reality, right? And so they've been doing the same thing the same way for 25 years, 30 years. They know the industry inside and out. They think it's 100% built on relationships, which I agree, it is. However, digital capability doesn't take away your ability to build strong relationships. It enhances your ability to create strong relationships. And so it is oftentimes, it is a mindset shift at the very highest levels of the business. Otherwise, the people underneath you, even if they're all for it, they get demoralized really quickly and they move on. So you will lose talent really quickly. If the leadership is not supportive of these digital channels, it's just not going to go anywhere. That's been my experience time and time again.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense to me, because I've seen it, especially with my age and younger, is for my age and younger, we want things to go quickly as far as adoption goes. Things happen fast. Therapy just a few years ago was something that most people didn't even talk about. Now you have to do it to even be Instagram worthy. So it's just so fascinating when I hear the B2B space, because I've seen that a few times where they're so far behind because they just think, well, we've always done it this way. But if you look at stories like Blockbuster is gone. They're a multi-billion-dollar company, had the opportunity to buy Netflix, which killed them, for less than $10 million. $10 million was nothing compared to what Netflix is worth now. But they laughed in the face of the people who own Netflix because they said, oh, that's just a fad. But you got to be able to, as leadership, even what we talked about in this podcast, just holding it with an open hand, right? And saying, okay, I've always done it this way, but times are changing. So there's new technologies, there's new things happening. What can I do to keep my business to, like you said, it's not taking away from what you're doing already that's working. It's actually adding another element for new people to be able to experience your brand.
Couldn't agree more. Stephen, this has been a fantastic conversation. I've seriously enjoyed it. I'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes, as well as a link to your website in the show notes. Other than that, how do you like people to get a hold of you if they want to have a chat about scaling their e-commerce business? What's the best way to reach out and have a chat with you?
LinkedIn. LinkedIn is definitely the easiest way. If you message my LinkedIn, that is me responding. So for me, I check that every single day. So if you actually want to have that kind of conversation, I'm right there on LinkedIn. And if it makes sense, we can always sit down and have a conversation. I always do those 15-minute virtual coffee chats, because at the end of the day, same reason why I'm here, I want to just add as much value as I can. So the person who is sitting there tying their self-worth to their brand and now it's not working and they feel like they're an absolute failure and that they're just going to die, that I can help you at least have the next step so you don't get stuck there.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much for your time. Can't wait to have another conversation with you again soon, my friend. Have a great day.
You too.
If you'd like to get mentored by Jason for free, head over to greenwoodconsulting.net, scroll to the bottom of the page, and click Get Mentored by Jason.